Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Life Conversations with a Twist. Happy Friday, and I'm really excited to have Jodi on. Jodi was reached out to me. I love when I get connected by people who are inspired by my podcast or connections. And you have a really cool story, and this topic is something that we haven't talked about on the podcast. So I'm really excited to have you on and to really dive into this topic. But Jodi, welcome. Please
Thank
tell
you.
everyone a little bit about who you are, where you live,
Thank you.
a
Thank you.
little into your own life.
Well, if you want twists, there's a lot of twists happening. After you've been on the earth for 5 decades, you've got a few of them. Um,
Even in the 5 minutes that you were talking to me about your story, I'm like, oh, we've got topics for sure.
we've got topics. Yeah, so listen in. In my story, I actually wrote a book called Estrangement, Healing for Mothers and Daughters. It's for everybody. It would work for everybody, even at work, because there's 8 chapters inside of it that talk about the way we treat each other and the way we think about each other and kind of how we fit in society to try to keep ourselves on solid ground. So, in fact, the cover of my book is like 2 women on each side of their bridge, and each side is they built themselves. It's fully secure. And they didn't take a brick from their bridge and go blow it up another person's bridge. So, estrangement, there's been a lot of bridge blowing up. And so, what I've learned through estrangement, through generations of estrangement, is that there are things that we can do. We might not be able to resolve the problems. We can definitely not be a part of the problems, but we can take care of, we could not add to the problem and be responsible for like what we do. And sometimes you just walk through the ugly, but you walk through the ugly because you love your family.
Can you, in your words, tell us what estrangement means to you, and kind of a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
about this conversation?
Yeah. Well, I'm at that. So estrangement is kind of like a spectrum. So I'm at the worst side of the most awful part where no one talks to me. I'm completely cut out of my children's lives. They want nothing to do with me. And that was the same thing with my family. If they did talk to me, it was about trying to look to think differently about problems that they had. They were personal problems, and I just simply wouldn't. So that's where I'm at. However, you could be estranged from your children, from your spouse, from your parents, from your boss, from your work people if they have a secret. If they have something they don't want you involved in. Now they don't you don't not everybody needs to know your business, but if your business affects your family member, if they're kind of pulling away and being quiet, that's like the beginning of like the secrecy, which will lead to contempt, that will lead to distorted thoughts, that will lead to twisting of words. And before you know it, um, you're reacting instead of trying to just kind of walk the path of peace and let others make their own choice, even though they may not choose what you want them to choose.
So interesting. So take us back to little Jodi.
Little Jodi.
Little Jodi, talk about a little bit about,
Okay.
your upbringing and kind of like what
Mhm.
your family dynamic was growing up.
Right. Right. So this is kind of interesting because I think, this culture here talks a lot about the cancel culture. People get just shut down and pushed away. There's not really any dialogue. But when I was growing up, the dialogue was very different. And for me, I was one of the children of the 60s. And so, the free love came out. And so my mom actually was pregnant with me in high school by my father. And at the time, if she would have told anybody, of course, my father, who else would it be? If she
I'm
would have
gonna pick
told
that
any,
up, but I was like, I'm just gonna roll with
yeah,
it.
if she would have told anybody, she couldn't have graduated from high school. And graduating was a big deal. Graduating from high school was a big deal when a lot of women, like her mom, I think she never even graduated the 8th grade. But of course, there was secrets and estrangement and adultery going on. And with my mom, my dad was 6 years older than her, and so I always say I graduated from high school twice, once as a fetus and once as an 18-year-old girl. So with my mom, it was kind of scary for her because it was before Roe versus Wade, and so she actually got married to her high school sweetheart. And so we went on this tumultuous ride, my mom and I did, between my father and her husband. And she ended up divorcing her husband eventually and then marrying my father when I was 10. But I met my father when I was 6. And he was part of that 60s free thing. And he was not a Christian of Christ. And he loved making money. And he was good looking, wealthy family. And I actually have 6 brothers and sisters, and there's 4 moms that we know of.
Wow.
So I had a plan at 19, and I laid that plan out. And I met my husband at 16 years old. He was really cool. He actually crawled out of a car that was driving 20 miles an hour into my friend's truck that we were going 20 miles an hour. Footloose, the movie Footloose was out. So he decided to go from one car to the other. This was Montana. So
I was gonna ask where this was. Okay.
this is Montana in the 80s. So things were you make your fun. You don't go do something on the internet where everybody sees it forever and throws it in your face, right?
Yeah.
Because it's recorded. But so we actually were dating. I said, "Hey, I am never going to be married unless you want to have a marriage that is in the church." So we started our marriage in the church. He was next to me our whole marriage at church. I homeschooled my kids, but then there was something kind of always off because he was the man I wanted at home, but he also, when he went to work, he had another life. And that all collided when my own children, estranged from me. And they had a confidant that was twisting my words, and that was my daughter's fiance's mother. And that's who my husband is now married to, is my daughter's ex-fiance's mother. And he's made that public. So I'm not outing him for anything. That's his journey. That's where he wants to go.
Mhm.
And so by then you just add hurt on top of hurt on top of hurt. And even if you do your best as a mom, even if you're a stay-at-home father and your mother works, whoever is the one that stays home and is always there, they're the soft pillow. And what I learned from my counselor that I first got when this happened is the soft pillow is always going to get it. Jodi, you always pound your pillow and fluff it. So I went through a serious pounding, and not literal, thank goodness, but figuratively. And so I wrote this book to help others because I spent a lot of money going to getting a master's in theology, seeing kind of the things that I was doing that I could do differently, and then just learning how to, in my personal world, really love who I am, no matter what my parents did, no matter what my culture did. The culture of the 60s, everybody sings how it's so great. Well, it hurt me, and I was a child. So it wasn't great for the children. So, and that's not to say you got to fix the culture today, because no matter what we fix, you're not guaranteed anything, but you can be guaranteed to hold your peace in your own culture, in your own personal world.
I have so many questions. So
Mhm.
you find out your husband is cheating on you.
33 years, and we spend all of our time together unless he's at work.
And then how old were your children at the time?
They actually, this was my children estranged in 2018. It was 2019 that I found a video on one of his old computers, very graphic, animalistic porn video of her. And
Of your
so the
daughter?
children didn't know of of the woman he's married to. This
Oh.
this this boyfriend's mother, the woman he's married to right now. And then it all made sense because they were in our lives for like 7 years because our daughter loved her son. And they were planning a wedding. They were planning time together. They lived in our house for a while to save money for a house. They were just doing our life. They were doing life together. But also, my husband and her were doing life. And so, whenever as an adult, you don't even realize that there's a soul tie. He created a soul tie with her that sunk everything I built over 33 years and everything he built.
And so
And
when
I
this
did stay with
happened,
him.
you did stay with him.
I did stay with him almost 19 months, 17 to 19 months afterwards. I went through counseling and I kept getting stronger. But then I seen that he was still doing what he was doing. I had a circle of counselors around me that were like, Jodi, if you stay there, he's not going to change. And he said that he would separate from me if was like, you need to change. And when I found out that he hadn't changed, I just left him like a thief in the night, and I filed separation papers, and he filed divorce. And I haven't seen him in 3 years.
And then your kids took his side through
Our
all
kids took no side.
this?
They're on their own. They're
Okay.
free and clear. They're free and clear because they were so shocked. Because there was videos of after they estranged from me, there were videos that she would post about how they're the family and they're spending Christmas. And I mean, it was extremely painful, extremely painful. So all the women out there and the men out there experience being the scapegoat for other people's choices. It's very difficult. But even if you want to leave your spouse, if you could be honest and say, hey, I'm going to go, instead of having one foot in the other. There's this great saying that I heard from a farmer's daughter, and her dad said, honey, if you have one foot in yesterday and one foot in the future, you just go to the bathroom on today. And I was like, wow. So yeah, it just, it had to change, and God knew what was going on. He knew. And so through that journey, I ended up becoming an author. I wasn't planning on author. It's never been my dream to be an author, but I've studied a lot. I used to homeschool my kids. I understand things. I could put them together and communicate them. And so that's why I started writing the books I'm writing. And I'm on a new journey, and I'm just hoping to help people. If you're estranged, you're going to be okay because most likely it's the symptom from a real problem. And if it's your problem, you can set it right. You can confess it. You could get counseling. You can stop. But if it's somebody else's problem, you are just being protected. And you can just get your side of your life so secure that when your children do come back, even if the problem's never resolved, you can still love your children and you love your parents, even if you don't agree with what's going on. That's possible.
I love that. And it's so interesting that people say like when they get into this space that they've gone through something hard or some
Hmm.
kind of, life hiccup or life
Right.
twist, that is really where so much growth happens. And being able to identify like the problem that you've gone through and being able to educate and inspire other people. Like you just see
Hmm.
so many people going through it. And I've seen some of my friends go through some really crappy things. And I'm like, I promise you, once you can get through this hard time, you are going to be able to tell your story and to be able to inspire people to know like it's going to be okay. It might not
Hmm.
be the like you were saying, like the life that we thought or the journey that we thought we were going to go
No.
on. And but you learn from it and then you help
Hmm.
educate others to
Hmm.
get through it. So I love I don't love anybody going through pain or hurt or
Hmm.
those kinds of things. But I love the blessing that comes on the other side of it,
Hmm.
to inspire others. What was like
Hmm.
the turning point? Like what happened with your children? Like what was it? Was it like one thing or was it like I think for me, where I'm sitting right now, I have a 18-year-old stepdaughter, I have a 13 and a 10-year-old son and daughter from my previous marriage, and then I
Hmm.
have a 3-year-old with my current husband. And like my biggest fear as a mom is not effing it up and like
You're
not
going
being able to
to.
have a relation.
It's
I
okay.
know,
You
I
will.
know.
And even if you don't, they have to come back around. Adam and Eve, God didn't mess it up. Come on. So, something will happen. But, with my situation, my family had many, many great times. However, we did chase his dream of his work. He was in the Navy 21 years. So we did 7 moves. That was terrible on my children. And I did everything I could, like homeschooled them. And I would take them back to their other place that they lived and give them vacations where they could see their old friends. And, I did everything I could to cultivate that with all those moves. And then when he got out of the Navy, he kept moving, and it was for jobs. And he moves around a lot looking for, he's very good at what he does, but he also gets bored very easily and he moves on. And that was hard for our children. And I was the one that made that peace for my kids. So he was just like, you have to deal with the kids. So I was the one, I dealt with the kids all the time. I was the one always in the home. He would go to the work. I'm the one that said, time for bed. I'm the one that said, this is what we're eating. I'm the one that says, shut up the video games. I'm the one that said, no, you're not going to go to your friends without their parents over there. And if their parents are doing shenanigans that I don't do, we're not going to do those things over there either, or I'll go with you. So, I always was involved, and they wanted me out of their lives. I think if maybe they were 13, I love the Hebrew community where they say it 13. That's why you have those parties, those bat mitzvahs and those bar mitzvahs. I can't pronounce it right. Anyway, it's because God says you're responsible for your life now.
Mm.
And trusting my children, letting go of that and letting them find their own way. But I had goals for my children and they did very well. And I always thought, well, my children are doing very well, so something must be okay. But there was always something sinister going on. And since I've been divorced, I've actually had half a dozen men and women come forward to me and say, Jodi, your husband was like this back in 1992 when you were pregnant. And so I started putting these pieces together and thinking, my daughter had such a hard time with maybe a little girl and her friend, and the way us moms tried to work it out. Well, later, the mom's husband, I find out, was cheating with multiple women. He was a pastor at one time. And then I find out my husband was at the same time. So here you have two moms trying to take care of two little girls to get along and learn how what to talk about. But then you have two moms that don't have their anchor beside them. And then you're trying to fix it. So there's always something you can't see. You know that Plato's cave where the slaves are chained to the wall. They can't see behind them. We really can't see what our husbands are doing. We trust them. We don't want to go around and be like chasing them down, but we can pray about it and pay attention. Our children, we don't know what's going on with our children. We let them go spend the night at someone's house. We don't know what's really going on over there. And will they tell us, or will they just be mad at us at dinner? So we don't know. We only know what we know. And so trying to help them to figure out their fate is going to be their fate, how they walk it is their choice, and then kind of showing them how to have resolve. And I hope I kind of did that for my children, but I also know I smothered them for a while.
Do you think
And
that that has a lot to do with where you guys are at today?
100%, 100%. Because if I would have not been so focused on creating the life I thought I was creating, and I would have been paying attention to all my surroundings. You know, there was little things that would happen, like we would go to, we were in the Navy, we'd go, or even at a work function, we'd go to a work function, and he'd take me by the shoulder and move me off to the side, say, I'll be right back. You know, where did he go? What was he doing? Why didn't he want to keep me near him at a work function? Those little tiny things that you're just like, well, that's weird, you know, or, you know, and I could write a whole book on all these little things. But when you're married, you believe him. Wife is the last to know. And in fact, unfortunately, I need to see a horrific video to realize what was really going on. I was oblivious, as were my children.
Do
Pretty
your children
wild.
still talk to him?
No. Mm-mm.
No.
Well, I don't know because I don't know anything, but no, because I think they ended it because of the situation. My son, I think, ended it because he gave me too much power with influence over my children. So my husband was very quiet. I was the bad cop, good cop. I was a bad cop. He was a good cop. So that is a red flag. I'm really sorry to tell anybody that, but if you're one parent disengaged with the construction of the guiding of your children and leaves it up to you, that's an imbalance there.
Mhm.
And that's a dance that's difficult and we'll all make mistakes. So, but at the same time, you know, God knew and God protected us. And I'm just like you talk about going through bad things. When I actually realized that was going on, when I saw that video of this woman that he's married to now, I mean, I know her better than she knows herself. And that's how bad it was. I felt like there was an elephant standing on my chest. And I heard myself, I didn't even know I said it. I heard myself say, Jesus, you want me to forgive this too. And the oozing of joy that comes from the Holy Spirit, like penetrated that whole room, almost like walking through peanut butter. It was thick. And I knew even though my body was horrifically full of pain, God had switched on my switch and it was all about him. And that's how I was able to walk almost 2 years with him and then walk out in the last 3 years of my life being a significant single woman, even though I know my children are hurting, they still got to find their journey. But my journey, I have found my talents again. I have found peace and resolve. with my parents. And I've also found peace and resolve with my every single day. And I'm kind of a little bit godsmacked about, I'm so glad I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad I'm here. And I was happy for 33 years. We had money. We were doing good. We got to do stuff we wanted.
Mm-hmm.
I'm good. I'm really good.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm better. Do I still hurt over my children? 100%. 100%. But you get very good at doing the resetting. And I reset with scripture and I reset with trusting God says he is what he said. He is who he is.
Mm-hmm. I want to revisit the conversation about smothering children.
Mm-hmm. We don't know we do it.
I I know, and I actually feel like I don't. I feel like I'm a very and I. It's interesting growing up in this day and age. One, and
Mm-hmm.
then two, growing up with your children's friends' parents, right? So it's like we're constantly in each other's lives. We're constantly like nitpicking what other people are doing, and so I don't want to like ruffle feathers or anything, but I feel like I've always been like more hands off ish because I was smothered as
Mm-hmm.
especially when I was a teenager. My mom like never trusted me. She would read my
She
journal.
was probably right. Was she right?
No, well, that was the thing. It's like you see when you're so smothered, like you
Yeah.
want to act out because you're like, God, like let me just be, right? So I was like, I don't want to be that as a
Yeah.
mom, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I feel
Uh-huh.
like I'm a little more like hands off with things and like people are like, wait, you don't make your kids lunch? I'm like, no, like they can make
Mm-hmm.
their own lunch. They are like young
Mm-hmm.
adults and they need responsibility. Like they need some of
Mm-hmm.
that, right? But I do have some mothers in my life who do really much smother their children, and I worry so much that they're
Mm-hmm.
just like pushing them away and
Mm-hmm.
just pushing
Mm-hmm.
them away. And like, come when they're like in a teenager, like that's, I feel like where that's when
Mm-hmm.
kids act out. That's when
Mm-hmm.
kids, go and be sexually active and like they do these things because they've been so like under a microscope.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting that you said that that's how
Mm-hmm.
you feel like you got to that point because you were such a smothering mom.
Right. Well, I think when you're smothering, you can't see what's going on.
Hmm.
And if I could have seen what's going on, I mean, my children still may have, I mean, I thought I set out to have this marriage a certain way and it wasn't. So my kids could have estranged anyway. I see people estranged for anything. I see parents that have a good balance and their adult child won't talk to them anymore because they've got their own secrets, or maybe their mom will not co-sign on a car. So it could be anything. And it just comes to the point where, like, for example, co-signing on a car. If you're 45 years old and somebody doesn't want to co-sign, your parent doesn't want to co-sign for a car, well, that might not be a good expectation that's feasible, that's kind, or that's even really known. And so it just kind of all those little things depends how you walk your journey. And my kids did their own laundry. My kids did do their own lunch, and they did have school as a responsibility. And when they left the house, they had a lot of great things that they got because of us. But there was definitely things that I thought the sky was falling down if something went wrong. The emotions were so strong because I even had like my own childhood emotions locked inside of me. So, if, for example, I actually experienced being discarded at uterus. And then I'd have my parents did their things that they were trying to do while I was a child, and I wasn't able to say, "Hey, mom, dad, I feel discarded." I couldn't have said that, but that was the emotion. And so I know that as I would go do everything for my children that I thought I could do, which I did give I don't I don't know if I could have done any more for my children other than let them kind of fall on their own. But I would feel very discarded when they wouldn't take care of something that I was doing all these things and they couldn't even do one simple thing that I asked them to do, or they would act like the sky was falling. Well, guess what? Teenagers act that way, right? But that discarded feeling was from uterus, and it was from my teenage life, and it was from my family. And now I have a normal teenager I just bought him a new car and they haven't even washed the car once in a year. I feel discarded. So, but yet, do they know that they're getting me responding to discarding this gift I gave them based on way back when I was a kid? Nobody knew. So there's practices that we can put in place to help us heal on our own personal camp so that we deal with those emotions. And anytime we have an emotion that is hurting us, we need to pay attention and go, where did that come from? Where is that? I need to heal that part of my body.
Hmm.
And that's my children's estrangement was the beginning of the healing of me. 100%.
It's interesting you talked about like getting on the being on the same page. It reminded me of a conversation I just had yesterday. Actually, my husband and I are going through marriage counseling, and um, because I need to get that relationship right, like it's like the
I
foundation
understand. It
for
is the
everything,
foundation.
right? Yeah, and so it's something that we've invested in, and one of the topic that we just had yesterday, which we're going to dive into more, is like being on the same page as a parent, and like especially when you have stepchildren involved, and like what we have to be on the same page, we have to like have the same views and understanding so we can support each other, so we're not against each other but we're like on the same team. So it's interesting that you bring that up because it's so true about um setting that groundwork and being able to have even having the conversation, which we never did. I always tell people, I'm like, when you go on a date, when you date someone for the first time ever, you're not, and then you decide to get married and stuff, I'm like, you're not just sitting there of like, how are you going to react when your kid throws a fit in the middle of a restaurant, or like, what are you going to do when your kid does XYZ? Like, how do you respond to that? Because you have absolutely no idea that these things even exist until they exist, and then you,
No, you don't.
oh crap.
I know it. I know it. Exactly. Well, I think what you need to do is think about, as long as you're walking your best journey, God has you because you don't know what's really coming at you or around you. You can be I was in the eye of the storm for a long time. And finally, when I started moving out of that eye, that's where I realized that we were really in trouble and why we are in trouble. It had nothing to do with his job. It had nothing to do with my job. It had nothing to do with the kids. It had to do with he had soul ties that were just tearing us apart. But I think that as long as you're on the same path, even when you have situations that don't work, as long as you know you both did your best and you can talk about it calmly and you love each other and you forgive each other. Agreeing with forgiveness is huge.
Hmm.
But as soon as, like in the book, I talk about the four horsemen that is from the Gottman Institute, talks about if you have contempt, if you have stonewalling, there's two other ones. If you start acting like that, pay attention to yourself. Why am I stonewalling my husband? It's easy to have contempt for your mother-in-law, right?
Hmm.
We got that one down. I mean, so like, why am I doing that? How
Hmm.
am I going to have a loving relationship if I keep on riding this horse of contentment, contempt with her or with him? So we can focus on ourselves, but at the end of the day, people make their own choices. And that's kind of like their free will.
Hmm.
It's really, and it's rough because they're going to make choices that exclude you. But at the same time, it might be because you need to work on something within yourself. And whether they come back or not, that's their journey. And that is the worst pill to swallow. But I'm telling you, once you swallow it, it feels good. You're going to grow.
Hmm. Before we were recording, you were talking about expectations. Um,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I was like, wait, stop, because I want to talk about it. I would love for you to,
Okay.
inspire
Yeah.
us and talk about that too.
So it's kind of cool because as I was writing it, the book came together on its own. I didn't even think about it till it was done. The first chapter is on expectations, and the last chapter is on expectancy. So the last chapter is on what we expect from God's kingdom, because kingdom is over our own personal kingdom, our own cultural kingdom, and even the sinister. So his promises are what you can expect. You can expect he'll be there. You can expect he's going to wipe all your tears. And in Isaiah, I think it's Isaiah 54, it says, expect that if you are a young married wife, and even if your husband leaves you, I'm paraphrasing, God Himself will expand your tent. You're going to be okay. He's your source. So, but then expectations, I'd like everybody to think about it as like horizontally in the world in history, because you could look through history and see what did they expect in the first 1,000 years of Earth, the 1500s, the 2000, those expectations, they might alter and they all end up having the same, have a problem, right? So they all are like, we got to do it differently. But expectations are known, they're clear, they're kind, and they're feasible. And with the people around you, you need to lay those out. And I realized that with my estrangement, I didn't even know my expectations of my children. I
Mhm.
didn't know their expectations, and I don't think they know mine. And so now it's a practice. So I practice like, if you're going to call me today, is it going to be 5 o'clock? I can do that and I can answer the phone. That's clear, that's known. But if you say you're going to call me and then you don't ever call me till a month later and you wonder why I went on and made my own plans without you, then you got a problem.
Mhm.
So practicing expectations that are clear, put it through a filter. Is your expectation clear? Is it known? Is it kind? Is it feasible? And it's not your right to have those expectations met. Ouch, that hurts. But yeah, then you get to forgive.
What, like, I mean, I know you've learned a lot,
Yeah.
but what are some of the things that you've really learned through this process that you can inspire others? Because you've walked through it, you've been through
hmm
it, and what have you learned that might be the person that is on the other side of this that
hmm
could be walking through it very soon, that you wish that you knew?
So I told all of my plans, to other people, like what I wanted to do if I was going to engage in a relationship. My husband, he knew my game plan, so he knew how to work around it. So while you're dating and trying to figure out what you're doing, let them show you who they are. Don't tell them what you want. Just let them see. And that's going to be so, so pleasant. And the other thing is there is nothing better than walking a journey, even if you're accused of things you did or did not do. Because there's things I did, but there's things I did not do that I've been accused of. But when you walk the journey, the kingdom of God knows your true heart. Wow, it doesn't matter. At least you walked it your best. And that's really at the end of the day, we tell our kids, do your best.
Mhm.
But that's kind of even under attack in our society. Do your best, but yet you're not going to go to this class or do this. But as a person, if you're walking your best through a storm, taking God's hand, that's phenomenal. It feels phenomenal to know you did the best you could.
Mhm.
I couldn't have given more to certain situations. I definitely would have given less had I known what was going on.
How long has it been since you've been estranged from your kids?
It'll be 7 years in January 2025. And it's very odd because I always think about, remember, expectations of scripture. I always think about the Old Testament. Every 7 years, if you went into a contract where you owed somebody money, you were free in 7 years. So I was estranged from my parents for 7 years and we were free. So I'm hoping that in January, my kids are like, I'm mad at my mom, but I'm going to try to figure it out. I hope they do that, but they might not. So yeah, it'll be 7 years in January.
Do you know, like, you don't know where they are, what they're doing, or?
I do know where they're at. I don't know exactly everything. My son did join the service, which I'm very proud of him for doing that. He always wanted to, and again, I never wanted him to because I was like, my baby, oh my gosh, my baby. Because my ex-husband and I were in the Navy. We saw stuff, we knew stuff,
Yeah.
and he knew secret stuff that if it's still not even known. And so I was fearful. And, a mom doesn't want her son to put himself in harm's way, but I know that's what he wanted. And I'm very happy for that. And then my daughter is living, she doesn't, I don't even think she does her degree. She got a degree, had a degree in cardiovascular. She doesn't even do that anymore. So I'm not quite sure. I know where she lives, but I'm not really sure. Other than that, but she's smart. She can figure things out. She'll get to the point she's going to be like, oh, I'm going to drop all these things and do all this. She's a smart girl.
Yeah.
She'll figure it out.
So I'm assuming that your hope is that someday they forgive to a
hmm
point where you guys can have a relationship.
Yeah, I talk about it in the book that I'm waiting at sunset in the light of the moon for tomorrow, where they'll become running on the horizon.
I love that.
And they're not going to find that mom they estranged from because I got rid of her too.
Well, and they say like every 7 years, like you were saying, like
Hmm.
you learn or you grow or whatnot, and so
Hmm.
after 7 years you could be a completely different person. And like how special would that be to be able to
Hmm.
like let go of that piece of
Hmm.
your life?
Yeah. Well, there's a part in the book, and I get this from C.S. Lewis and also Tim Keller, is that if you make something an ultimate thing that's supposed to be a good thing, you're going to be in trouble. There's going to be something that's going to come together. So that's a practice. My parenting was ultimate. My marriage was ultimate. But it was really a good thing. My kids were good. My marriage was good, but they weren't ultimate. And
Hmm.
when you make things ultimate, you make them your source. And God really is our source. That's the expectancy of God waiting on Him. He's the one that fulfills all of our needs. Otherwise, we put so much pressure on our spouses and on our children and on the golf coach and on the teachers. And we're one heck of a messed up people if we want to be.
Seriously. What do you say to that person who is against or maybe hasn't realized the importance of self-love, personal development, professional
Mhm.
development, counseling, like being able to like really like embrace like learning about yourself. I experienced a lot of these people.
Mhm.
And what do you say to somebody like that?
So what I've really learned is somebody that doesn't want to grow because, I was living with my husband for almost 2 years and he didn't want to grow, right? So it's a lot like a dog that gets hit by a car. You got to take them to the vet and put them in the car, but they're going to bite you. So they almost have to hurt enough to finally say enough is enough. But the reason why they're doing that is because there are trapped emotions in the human body that is like being hit by a car. It's so painful. When you're walking around feeling disregarded, you're feeling disrespect, you're feeling abandoned, you're feeling neglected. And then you try to love somebody with those, it's like you have all those emotions in there. Like imagine they're like little points poking out. And yet, even if you buy somebody a necklace, maybe you're mad that they didn't wear it. So now that necklace becomes a razor blade. So you have to heal within, and until they want to, it's their journey. And it's easier to love them when they accuse when you know. Like having people accuse me of things, it's so amazing to me because I just sit there because I know God above, He speaks for who I am.
Mm-hmm.
That cross speaks for who I am.
Mm-hmm.
So, and if I've done something wrong, then yeah, if you don't like that, I'm always leaving the toaster plugged in and you want it unplugged, I'm going to finally unplug the toaster. But if you're still yelling at me, that's something with you. That's your emotion. That's not me. And I
So
had to learn that the hard way.
yeah.
I had to learn that the hard way.
Now you can educate and inspire us to do it.
It's so funny. I'll walk through the airport and I can almost pick out everybody that's got a secret shenanigan with their spouse. It's unbelievable because I watched it and we were in the Navy. We lived in had 33 addresses. Yeah.
Is there anything we didn't talk about that you want to?
Um, Go out and get the book Estrangement and give it out to people. Do like a Bible study. You can just start working on yourself. Of course, the book is not your source. God is your source. But just love the people that you're around, and they probably have things that you cannot see. But also be smart. If somebody's going to be physically hurting you or destroying your income, you need to put some space. A lot of people use the words boundaries. Well, boundaries are very nice, but not when they're in the hands of an executioner. So be very careful how you do no harm. Do no harm.
I love that. I'm so glad that we connected. I definitely will
Thank you.
be watching you from afar and hoping that your children come around.
Yeah, we'll be a celebration. We'll do a cruise. Buddy.
I love that. And I'm so glad that we got connected. You leaned into this conversation. You definitely have solidified some thoughts that I've been going through with counseling, that, you hear it so many times, and it's interesting to hear a different perspective and somebody who's kind of been through it already. So I appreciate you being here, and we'll put in the show notes how everyone can find you, how they can get your book, which is on my list now. But thank you.
And remember, you can be so strong that no matter what everybody else does, you're still going to be strong.
I love that. Thank you for that.